Welcome to Soul Science, the official podcast of Sports and Exercise Podiatry Australia. We're your hosts, Pat, John and Harriet. We're all sports podiatrists with a passion of advancing the profession. In each episode, we dive into the latest research, share compelling stories from clinicians and feature special guests who have made significant contributions to the world of sports and exercise podiatry and lower limb sports medicine. John, Harriet, good morning.
Good morning. Nice to be able to be in Sydney.
It is, but it's worth getting up for a guest as I'm honoured to speak to Ian this morning over in the UK as a Brit myself. Is this the first British podiatrist we've had on the podcast?
Well, you.
Oh, well, other than myself, obviously. Yeah.
All right, let's step right into it. Today we're joined by one of the most respected voices in global sports podiatry and foot biomechanics, Ian Griffiths. With over 2 decades of clinical, academic and elite sport experience, Ian brings a rigorously evidence-based yet deeply human approach to the field. He holds fellowships in podiatric medicine from both the Royal College of Podiatry and the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Glasgow, and lectures in sports and exercise medicine at Queen Mary University of London. He's also the adjunct faculty at Monash University here in Australia and teaches internationally on topics such as foot orthoses, biomechanics and injury management. In this episode, we combine powerful stories with practical insights as Ian reflects on the pivotal moments that shaped his career, from working in the athletes' village at the London 2012 Olympics to publishing on running, retraining, footwear, and the evolution of orthotic theory. Together, we explore themes of perseverance, professional growth, and the quiet dedication it takes to achieve meaningful impact in both elite sport and everyday practice. This episode offers a candid look at the journey of striving for excellence in sports podiatry, in science, in the art of care, and the lessons learned along the way. Ian, welcome to Soul Science.
Welcome.
Thank you. You've massively oversold me there, but they are some very kind words. So yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Well, to kick things off, everyone gets asked this question. What does sports and exercise podiatry mean to you, Ian?
You sent me through a few things you were going to ask, and you said you were going to start with this one. I was like, what an awful starter. I had to think about this on the way home today, and I think this is the best I could come up with. I feel like as podiatrists, we have a certain set of skills. It sounds like Liam Neeson there, but we do things that I think a lot of other professions do. We do things that doctors do and physiotherapists do, but I feel like when it comes to certain things, we do them best. We do them better than other professions, and one of those, not the only one, but looking through my own bias, is foot biomechanics, understanding foot function, understanding how the foot interacts with the world around us. But I don't think it's fair to say that sports and exercise podiatry is foot biomechanics. I think it's more complicated than that. And I reflected on a student asked me a question last week, and they said, well, what's the definition of a sports injury? And we ended up in this really interesting discussion where we agreed that if we had an Achilles tendinopathy or a plantar heel pain in a Premier League footballer, we all agreed that would be a sports injury. And yet if we have an Achilles tendinopathy or plantar heel pain in an overweight, sedentary, middle-aged man, it's not viewed as a sports injury. So we came to the conclusion as a group, there's this sort of wisdom of the crowd, that it isn't the pathology that dictates sports injury. So I feel like when it comes to sports and exercise podiatry, it's more about how we manage pathologies, but very much in the context or through the lens of the sports person, the sports sort of arena, the sport itself. So it's not just enough to know how to assess someone, understand biomechanics, manage pathologies. It's understanding sport. It's knowing the unique demands of certain sports. It's knowing the psychology of the sports person themselves, the footwear that they have to wear, the unique demands on the foot of that sport. So I feel like that's the best I could do with the definition of what sports and exercise podiatry sort of means to me.
Cool. And do you think there's an element of sports podiatry in every client? I feel like as a podiatrist, you kind of, as you get older and more experienced, you kind of can see those applications in a wider range of clients, even if they're just, I don't know, going for a walk every week.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely. I don't think someone has to earn a living from sport to be treated the same way by us. I was in clinic earlier today. I work in the centre of London, and we see a lot of what we'd class type A personalities, which I'm sure you do too in Sydney, in big cities. work hard, play hard, lawyers, bankers, very successful, driven, and time poor people. And they approach their training for an Ironman or even just park run sometimes with the mentality of someone who's an elite sports person. I mean, they're not, but they're taking it incredibly seriously. They're data driven. They're mindful and knowledgeable now about sleep and nutrition and load management. And you find that the discussions you're having and the interventions you're providing are pretty similar to that you would someone elite. So I totally agree with that.
Ian, let's take a deep dive into, I guess, your career. Your career's expanded quite a number of years. I guess, what are some of the defining moments that sort of shaped how you practice today?
You made me feel old there, Pat. A little bit of me cried. A little bit of me cried inside. I'm really lucky. I have been really lucky through my career, and I'm really lucky to love what I do and to hold like this. I guess we'd call it this clinical academic position where I spend a bit of my time in clinic and a bit of my time academically. And that's always what I wanted to do. And when I think about perhaps some of the things early on that shaped that, if that's the right word to use, I think one of the earliest memories I have, and this is a friend, a lifelong dear friend now I want to give a shout out to. When I first qualified and got my very first job, this was in 2003, and I qualified, and back then we all went into the NHS. I know the world is very different now, but back then in 2003, you got your BSc podiatry, you went into the NHS, and you did a few years in the trenches, and you often didn't have a job. You couldn't find a job exactly where you lived, and you had to be willing to move, and that was just what we did. So I moved to Oxford, which is in the middle of the country, nowhere near where I grew up. I moved there with my girlfriend at the time, had no friends, knew no one, and back then in the NHS, we used to work something called a 9-day fortnight, which basically meant you worked slightly longer days, so that by the time you'd worked 9 days, you'd done the equivalent of 10 days. So ultimately what I mean is every other Friday you had off. And of course, my then girlfriend, who I was living with, who was the only person I knew in Oxford, was at work. So I had every other Friday off with absolutely nothing to do, no friends. And it just so happened in this first job in Oxford, there was a colleague of mine called Justin, now a very, very, very dear friend. Every other Friday for 3 years, we would do this. We'd spend the day together. We'd read journals. We'd reflect on cases. We had fun along the way, of course. But it really set me up, I think, for my entire career. And still to this day, that reading research on a regular, weekly basis isn't a chore. It's not something I have to do. It's I guess some people read fiction. I don't know everyone spends their free time differently. I just, from the very, very start, reading journals became normal. Consuming and digesting and synthesizing research became normal. And I didn't realize at the time what an important role that has played in my life and still continues. And I would say then, layering on top of that, more recently, a move into private practice from the NHS and a move into working in a multidisciplinary team, which again, I'm sure you guys all do, already. But at the time, first few years of NHS was very much quite isolated within a podiatry department. And when I moved into private practice and started working with sports and exercise medicine physicians, with physiotherapists on a daily basis, having those same kind of reflective practice type discussions, discussing cases, sharing patients, that just catapulted my understanding of things. And to this day, people say to me, what's the best thing you can do? I say, like, work with people who aren't podiatrists, that MDT kind of, that wraparound MDT team. So I think it's great to work with podiatrists because they can, you can bounce things off them. But I also think surrounding myself with physios was, for me at least, probably one of the things that really, really shaped who I am today as a clinician.
So how did you get your into the 2012 Olympics?
Yeah. Again, luck. I can't say that word enough. I've been so lucky in my profession. It was so 2012. I graduated 2003. So I'd been qualified 9 years, and I'll be honest. And I've been in private practice for perhaps, I don't know, 5 or 6 at that time. And so I'd been working with physios and doctors, but I didn't feel ready. I felt like a bit of a fraud. And it was at the time. There was an application process. So basically it was a case of, right, there's going to be inside the athletes' village, there will be a polyclinic. It was more like a hospital, if I'm honest. The thing was huge. There's going to be, radiologists, dentists. I mean, everything, every single medical provision. And I don't think I'd appreciated at the time that, whereas the big countries, let's call them, the big, as in the big, the juggernauts of the Olympic Games. So your Australias, your Team GBs, Germany, etc. They bring with them their own medical team. So they've got doctors, they've got physios. Even those ones very, very rarely bring podiatrists to Olympic Games on another continent. And then, of course, we've got all of the other countries that didn't even bring physios with them. So we were very lucky as podiatrists that we, even in the athletes' village, we would see every single person from Team USA, Australia, Team GB, whereas the physios inside the athletes' village only tended to see people from the countries who hadn't brought physios with them. So yeah, it was an application process. I took a punt. I got lucky. I got in, and it was as awesome as you expected it to have been. Really, it's funny. I was just talking to my kids just yesterday. We were at the dinner table and we were chatting. I'm turning 50 in 2028, so only a few years away now, sadly, and we were trying to work out what we're going to do for my 50th, and we just sort of dawned on me that the Olympic Games is in 2028 in LA, and I said, why don't we go to LA and do a little kind of all go to the Olympics, me, my wife, my two boys, and then do a little bit of a kind of I guess West Coast, San Francisco, Las Vegas. Yeah. And I said, because I think it'd be really cool, and Olympic Games are really cool. And I was just midway through the talk, and my eldest son says to me, Dad, are you about to tell us you worked at the Olympic Games again? And I was like, do I talk about this too much? It was honestly, I truly believe career peak. I don't know that there's anything I will ever do that, I think when my time comes and I'm, looking back on my career, I don't believe I get higher than that. It was awesome.
That's cool.
Well, I'd like to ask then another career peak of yours, which is the most recent paper that you published with the Clinical Practice Guidelines for Plantar heel pain through an international lens. I haven't actually read it. I've read sort of the abstracts because I don't think it's open access at the moment. Could you tell us more about the research?
Yeah, I can send it to you also if you want. So this particular thing is interesting. It's not so much a paper as it is. So this is essentially a letter to the editor. And it's a response. So what happened was a few months before, a group of Americans published a paper called Heel Pain Plantar Fasciitis Guidelines or something like that. And it was terrible. Ultimately, what they've done is they've done a really, really wide and broad and in-depth literature review, but they hadn't really passed it through any kind of quality sieve. They hadn't done any kind of systematic. The way we normally expect that kind of data to be handled, we looked at it and it hadn't been done. And then they graded certain treatments for heel pain, A, B, C, D, based on what they thought was kind of the most important, based on their interpretation of the evidence. And there's a group of researchers in Denmark who I'm sure you'll be familiar with, Michael Rathliff, Henrik Reel. They're big in the heel pain. And there's a couple of us at QMUL in London, and we'd in 2021, we'd published a best practice guide for heel pain in the BJSM. So Denmark got in touch with us, and we all agreed that this was worthy of a the old-fashioned way of calling out a paper. So, present day, if you read something you don't think it's good, what most people do is they go to Twitter and they bash it a little bit. And we were like, there's a traditional and an appropriate and a professional way to do this, which is to write a letter to the editor, really outlining what we thought its flaws were. So I'll send it to you. It's interesting. We were given a really tight word count, so we couldn't go into all of the things we didn't like about it. We had to kind of pick the big ones. But ultimately, we thought that they had, and they'd graded the value of strength or resistance training far too high based on the level of evidence. And bear in mind, we've got Rathliff and Reel on our authorship group, and most of the strength work within heel pain, they were the authors of as well. And even they were like, they're overselling the value of strength based on the data we currently have. So they'd slightly overvalued the benefits of strength. And they'd really undervalued, well, not undervalued, they'd completely omitted the use of shockwave. it was not in their clinical practice guideline at all. So this was their paper they published in the JOSPT. And when we asked them, and when we got in contact and we said, look, this can't be right. There's quite a large body of evidence for this. It came out really well in our previous systematic review. They said, oh, that's because it's not common for physical therapists in America to use it. Is that, well, just because you're publishing a clinical guideline, which will clearly have an international reach in a journal like JOSPT, you can't leave things out just because you don't do them in America. If the evidence is there, the evidence is there. So they overvalued strength, they undervalued or completely omitted shockwave, and they also didn't put any real emphasis on patient education, which we're really, really, and I know you guys are too, we're really, really, that's a hill we'll die on about how important that is. The only thing they'd really said about patient education is how important it is to lose weight. That was the only thing they'd said. They'd not talked about footwear, about load management. So we wrote that paper is a letter to the editor saying, this recent publication, we don't think it's appropriate. We think these things should be regraded. And nothing happened, of course. But at least it's out there. It's out there sort of in the public domain, so to speak, albeit behind a paywall. It's on record that we don't think it's a great bit of work. Yeah, that's essentially what that bit was.
I think that's much more respectable than slagging someone on Instagram or TikTok or something.
Yeah, it's the way we used to do it. I know it's not particularly, it's a bit more of a long-winded way of just sending a tweet nowadays. We thought it had more impact. Turns out it didn't. It didn't do anything, but there we go.
How fun. I get
Yeah.
Yeah, ticking fights.
Did no one ever contact you about it? Like, not one person.
So the interesting thing was where I'll send you the paper. It's our letter to the editor, and then obviously by the time they've published our letter to the editor, after it is a letter from the authors in response to our letter, where they basically just disagree with everything we said. They even quote back. Bear in mind, we've said that there's really not the evidence for resistance training that you're talking about here. They quote back to us papers that, if you look at the group of us that wrote it, like all the papers they quote back to us, allegedly supporting their argument, were from people writing the letter, in the first place, like Harriet and Michael, really, really good scientists, like, crazy.
Viral.
Yeah.
This is academic fighting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you feel like the focus on resistance training is a bit of a trend these days? I mean, there's obviously in poor quality work, there's a lot of focus on, intrinsic foot muscles. You see it all over the internet. It seems to be the thing that clients in clinic tend to come in with, and a real kind of idea that if they just do a whole heap of foot exercises, their pain's going to resolve. And I wondered, from your point of view, is that something you're seeing now in practice?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. We've got people, as in, patients, clients, athletes, of bringing beliefs with them that weakness is what's got them into this place, and strength training is what gets them out. And then we've got that constant, cognitive juggling that we do within ourselves every day in clinic, which is, most people probably could be a bit stronger. And actually, I really think resistance training has really, really good qualities, and there's probably not many people that shouldn't be doing a bit more, particularly the older they get. If nothing else, someone in my age bracket, in our mid to late 40s, we should be doing it just to stave off sarcopenia, if nothing else. But when we look at the data, there's really not that much robust evidence that these kind of deficits in strength cause problems. Those trials just don't really exist, and that strength training is really the sole thing that gets us out of problems. So it's that constant thing of like, we should probably be doing a bit more. We should probably be telling our patients to do it. But if we're trying to stay true to the evidence, we've also got to say, look, this isn't really strongly supported. But then when someone comes in with the belief that that's what they need to do, and we're going to be truly patient-centered and build rapport, it's kind of what we had with Orthoses about 30 or 40 years ago. We just switched it in for strength training now. And we do run the risk, I think, of 20, 30 years ago, just throw a device in someone's shoe indiscriminately without much thought or clinical reasoning. I do think we run the risk of getting to a point in the future where we've got podiatrists just going, well, let's just throw a strength program at this. And that's not to say we shouldn't do that, but it's to say there needs to be more of a reasoned approach and a more of a targeted, sort of tailored approach.
I think as the old El Paso ad, why not both orthotics and strength? But I guess my real first foray into your sort of work, Ian, was probably back in 2019. I mean, I had heard of you, but I didn't really understand most of the stuff you did until I listened to you on Brad Beer's podcast, the Physical Performance Show. And that really kind of opened my eyes on a bit more of what you were doing. So I guess, looking at your research, you have been on the forefront of more recent orthotic research. Tell us, what is your understanding of how orthoses actually work?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer here is I don't know. I know that they do work. No, let me quickly rephrase that. I know that they can work. As in, I know they can work for some of the people some of the time. I know that when they do work, the outcomes can be quite profound. As far as their mechanism of effect, I'm still as much in the dark as anyone, as perhaps not as I ever have been. But I know back in when I recorded that podcast with Brad, I laid on the pharmacology and anecdotes and metaphors. Really, I was pretty heavy on those. I've probably dialed back on them a little bit, but I probably still use them in clinic. The best I've got right now is, if this was an exam question that I was asking one of my students in an OSCE, and I said the answer I'd expect for them to illustrate some level of understanding, for them to get a pass. If I said to them, what's the mechanism of effect? What's the main ways that the orthoses, work? I think they'd probably pass if they said to me via one of 4 potential mechanisms: kinematic, kinetic, neuromotor, or psychological. I feel like they're 4. Kinematic, kinetic are obviously, we've artificially separated them. They could, I guess, be the direct mechanical effects, kinematics, kinetics, neuromotor effects, or psychological effects. But as far as going into another layer of understanding, I mean, I haven't got much at the moment. I suspect it's probably not either or either. It's probably this mishmash or blend of mechanisms, and it's person specific, and it's unpredictable and sometimes unexplainable. I've got nothing for you here. I wish I did. And it's the thing, isn't it, that when we're talking amongst ourselves as colleagues, if you're at conferences having these chats, you can have these open, transparent discussions. And then when in clinic, if you're talking to a patient, I mean, you want to be as honest and transparent as possible, but you don't necessarily want to tell them. I imagine how I'd feel if the doctor gave me a drug and said, I don't really know how this works, but let's give it a crack. I'd be like, well, hang on a minute. Could you show me some level of understanding? So the way I answer it to you here is possibly not what I'd say to a patient, but that's the best I've got. We don't fully know, but it's via one of those kind of more, overarching kind of umbrella mechanisms that I've mentioned.
Yeah.
And when you're making that clinical decision about orthotic prescription or whether to prescribe an orthotic, what's your kind of go-to? Are you looking at the injury or the potential for injury and thinking about offloading tissues, or where does your kind of thought process go when you're in that clinical situation?
Yeah, rightly or wrongly, my bias currently, at least, it may change, I'm sure, is, I guess, what in old terms we'd refer to as the tissue stress theory. So someone comes in with, perineal tendinopathy, and my thought process is, okay, is this a tool that I think will help offload that structure for a given period of time, if that's what I think needs doing? And then, of course, that's not to say I completely disregard foot posture or, architecture and foot dynamics. They're obviously part of the overall thought process, but I wouldn't worry too much about, valgus wedging, i.e. trying to pronate an already pronated foot in the case of a perineal tendinopathy. So I guess you could probably say that's me practicing via the tissue stress theory rather than anything else. But that said, I find myself increasingly just falling back. I mean, obviously I use the subtalar joint rotational equilibrium theory. I'm constantly thinking about the sagittal plane for runners because it's the plane they function in most predominantly. So people say, "Oh, do you subscribe to Kirby's theories or Dannenberg's theories or McPoyle's, tissue stress?" And I'm like, I'm kind of like a Frankenstein's monster of all of these things with a little bit of nuance and hopefully clinical reasoning as well.
Awesome. Ian, I've got a paper here from 2023 of yours in relation to the I think it's 3D printed nylon shells in your 2023 study. And there's a very fancy jig that you use, which I really thought it was quite interesting to measure the stiffness. I guess following on to that study, in Australia, we have podiatrists using 3D printed, we have EVA, we have traditional handmade vacuum pressed polypropylene in various densities. How do you think that stiffness changes using different materials and different postings, whether it's vacuum pressed or 3D printed or milled?
Yeah, I think that's the paper that Gabrielle was lead author on, isn't it, from Canada, if memory serves. I should remember it 2 years ago. So I led some work back in earlier than that, a few years before that, where I looked at polypropylene. Same jig, similar sort of setup, took polypropylene shells, all identical, 3 millimeters thick. So at the time, I would guess I was using a lot of I've historically used a lot of polypropylene, given the time period that I was kind of prescribing in the first sort of half of my career. So I looked at polypropylene shells, 3 millimeters thick, identical shapes, like completely identical shells, but just with different rear foot posts. I think one of them had no post at all, no extrinsic post. One was a 6 mil heel raise, one was a 4-degree varus post extrinsic. And then we put them in the jig in the engineering lab at university, and we obviously loaded them and just checked their stiffness, their load deformation characteristics. And what we found was that even though the shape of the arch and the material thickness of the shell was identical in all of them, when you added something under the rear foot, the midfoot got stiffer. Now, again, limitations to this. This is in a lab, in a jig. It's not a patient-facing study, but to our mind, if something is stiffer, then it has one of two potential outcomes. Firstly, it can generate greater reaction forces, and that may be a good thing or not, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And secondly, it may influence comfort or tolerance, so whether the patient likes it or not. And when Gabrielle did that work, and obviously I was lucky enough, he reached out to me and he'd seen my work, and he said, "Oh, we'd like to do this in Canada with slightly different materials." And he's also done things now where he's added 4-foot posts. He's an incredible scientist, actually. Worth checking out his work. But he was lucky. He then invited me in and said, "Do you want to join our research group and kind of collaborate with us and read this? We'll check the methodologies, try and make the methodologies as similar as possible." So there was some kind of ability to, have the second study build on the first. It wasn't totally different, but he did use different shells and materials. And I think what we found, regardless of the materials of the shell we've used, is that when you add the rear foot posts, the midfoot gets stiffer. And that's whether we use polypropylene, nylon, 3D printed, vacuum formed, at this point anyway, at least, like we say, in vitro. Of course, moving forward into the future, I suspect we know 3D printing is going to be a really big deal, and we're going to have the ability to, I suspect, rather than just, when we write our prescriptions now, we say what material we want and what thickness we want, and we give them the patient's weight, and then we say what post we want. There'll come a time where we'll, or it's already here, where we'll be able to say we want the shell stiffer in this region compared to that region, stiffer medially than laterally, etc. So perhaps the whole rear foot post thing is kind of irrelevant. But for us at the time, it was really about understanding when we the things we wrote on that bit of paper, how do they potentially influence the patient's experience, either with regards to outcomes or just comfort and tolerance. Because I had so many patients coming in saying, not so many, but some saying, this arch, this device feels really, really uncomfortable in my arch. It feels like a lump, feels like a golf ball. And you could play around with the height of the arch, and it would sometimes help, sometimes not, but pretty sort of across the board. If you then ground off the extrinsic post, removed it, they said the middle of it felt loads more comfortable. So we felt this was something where we could say, if you want a stiffer device and you don't want to remake it, or you don't want to, reshape the shell, add something to the rear foot and you make it stiffer. If someone comes in and they're finding it too stiff or uncomfortable in the midfoot, take the rear foot post away and you make it more comfortable. So we wanted to do something lab-based that might change or help us troubleshoot in clinic. And at the moment, at least, the materials and the method of manufacture doesn't seem to influence the outcome, which is rear foot posts make the midfoot stiffer, removal of rear foot posts make the midfoot less stiff or more compliant. So we still got a bit more work to do on that, of course, and we need to then obviously move into, you know, out of the lab and into in vivo, you know, patient satisfaction, patient comfort studies. But that's the best thing about research I could advise people, is find a project that you can always then do a bit more, and then it gives you the idea for the next one and the next one. Then you've basically got, you never have to think about what your next project is, because all the things that the first project doesn't answer, you go, okay, well, that's the next project, and then you just continue like that.
So I guess in the context of your research, you know, it's a well-rounded, well-nuanced conclusions that you've come to date. I guess at university level, you know, when I was at university, and probably Harriet and John as well, we're probably taught very more mechanical-based theories, like, you know, root theory, tissue stress theory, but more from a very specific, exact angulations and whatnot. Where university is now and the research that has been done to date, how do you think that should change in terms of the way that we educate our future podiatrists?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I was taught the same as you, very mechanistic, very algorithmic. We've dabbled with different ways of doing this, and I'd love a scenario where I used to think that the best case scenario would be, imagine you took someone with a completely blank canvas, because I think we all agree that when we were taught a certain way, and then when it came along that maybe what we were taught wasn't super accurate, and we then had to we couldn't just, we're not like a computer file where we can delete a file and upload a new one. We had to bring in all this new information and somehow, you know, make sense of it on top of what we already knew. We couldn't unknow what we already knew. So I used to, I think, naively think that with a blank canvas, like an undergraduate student that comes with no knowledge at all, if we never teach them root theory, then maybe they don't have the same baggage that we do. They don't have the same, cognitive dissonance that we do. And I loved the idea of just saying, look, if we teach people anatomy and we teach people physics and, you know, functional physics and anatomy, you know, biomechanics, the science of how we move, if we teach them, you know, all of those principles, you know, joint moments, lever arms, etc., and we teach them then material science, so how certain tissues respond to load, human tissues, that is, and we also teach them how injury occurs, you know, that Scott-Dye envelope of function, or, you know, the load deformation curve, and all those kind of things. I truly believe that then when you had a student that sat in front of a patient, and the patient, you say to the patient, okay, tell me what happened. And they say, well, I was running down the left wing and this, and you, once you heard the story, you visualize the mechanism, you know the anatomy, you know the site, the physics of what's happened, you've identified the mechanism of injury, and now you know how to intervene with either rehab, orthoses, all of the above. That was my naive kind of thought process. It just doesn't seem to be the case. It seems that students, when they're very first starting, they need frameworks. They really, really value frameworks. I also think that we're in a scenario where there's that famous quote that those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. So if we don't expose people to things like root theory and help them identify what it is and perhaps some of its limitations, if we just pretend like it doesn't exist, how do we know that in 30 years' time someone doesn't suddenly go, hang on a minute, guys, I've had this idea that the rear foot should be perpendicular, and they won't know any different, and we'll just repeat history again, right? So I don't know how to reconcile all of this. I truly don't, but I do think that we regularly expose our students to all the things that we know are wrong. So I do a whole lecture on root theory. I don't use the foot posture index personally in clinical practice. Personally, I know some people do, and that's fine. But I teach all of my students the foot posture index, because I think the best way to understand if something has value or utility, or even the best way to understand what the limitations of something are to know about it. So we get them all to kind of do the foot posture index. We get them to do each other's. We do a little in class. I get one person to come up, and then every single student does the foot posture index blindly and, you know, secretly on this one person, then we all say what our answers are, and they vary wildly. And you see the students' faces just kind of go, well, hang on a minute, like if we all can't agree, has this thing got value? So we teach things and then hope that the penny drops for the student. And also I want them to know about something they're going to come across. They're going to go into clinic and someone's going to mention it, and they need to be able to hold that conversation. They're going to open a research paper, and the foot posture index will probably be used because it's still probably the best thing we have for categorization of feet in a research setting. So I don't know what the quick and simple answer is, but I do know that I think the way we were taught, and we're the first, aren't we, to go, oh my goodness, all the things we taught were wrong. We were so like, I think we were done. I think they did okay by us, our lecturers. I truly do. I think we've got to where we are because of the way we were taught. And I think we probably just have to, you know, do the same for our future students. Although in my own mind, there must be a better way, but I haven't found it yet.
I think that's a really nice concept, like don't repeat history. But I also think there is value in teaching all the students all of those theories and outdated models and things like that, because it actually exposes them to look at the foot and to learn by looking. I remember being a student, I reckon for the first like 2 years, no one touched a foot because everyone was all weirded out. So I think I see a lot of value in teaching it, even though it's not necessarily what we all do anymore.
Well, I've still got my root textbooks, so.
Yeah, mine are on the shelf just here behind me. I
got a couple down there.
You know, and you go back to them periodically and you look at them and you're like, yeah, there's some really good stuff in here. As always, you know, like I think over the years, the things that Root was actually saying and what we now sit here, 55 years later and go, oh, this is what Root said. You kind of, some of those things we're saying he probably didn't actually say. You know, 50 years can do a lot to really, really jumble up a message. But yeah, I don't have a great answer for that. I think we just have to hope the students find their way. We have to equip them, I guess, with a good ability to appraise and critique what they're reading, and you know, don't trust anything you read. I say to students, like, you know, they say, oh, I just read your recent paper. I was like, tell me something you didn't like about it. Tell me something you disagreed. And they look at me like, I can't. I was like, no one is above criticism. No one is above critique. Like, it's okay. Like, no one's perfect either. So like, don't read a paper and believe it just because you like the person that wrote it or you know the person that wrote it. Like, view it through the lens of critical appraisal and find something wrong with it, because there's something wrong with everything. So yeah, if we equip them to think like that, then I think they'll be fine in the long run.
I guess building onto that, Ian, you've done a bit of stuff on footwear and injury prevention, and you know, since years of footwear research, you know, 2-hour marathon times have been broken, and shoes have gone from, you know, minimalist, neutral, maximalist to now daily trainers, tempo shoes, race shoes, different foams, carbon plates, whatever it is. Where do you think podiatrists should sit now in prescription shoe logic?
Yeah, it's such a tough one, isn't it? I mean, it used to be, even though it wasn't necessarily accurate at the time, it used to be so simple when we had like the three types of shoe. Because then we obviously incorrectly would be like, right, we got 3 different types of feet, you know, low arch, high arch, and then the fictitious normal in the middle, and we've got neutral and stability and motion, and we just marry them up and everyone lives happily ever after. We know that wasn't true, but wasn't it a lovely simple time? Yeah, the research we did, it was a Cochrane review, which is just a systematic review, but a big beast. It was quite some undertaking, actually. There was a group of us that did it, and it won't surprise any of you to hear that after a year of our lives and more data crunching than you can imagine, and stats and forest plots like you get, it basically came out that there was no reduction in running injuries when we compared different types of shoes, and matching shoes to based on foot posture, there's little to no evidence for. You know this stuff already, but it basically just it just made us realize that we don't really know what we're doing here. Now, the other thing I should always be mindful of reminding people is that's when we talk about shoes can't prevent injury, we're talking really on a population level. And I think it's always important to identify that when we're talking on a population level, it's not the same as when we're talking on an individual level. And then there's definitely nuance there. So I don't think it's appropriate to say stability shoes prevent injuries, but it could be appropriate to say for this person in this scenario, a stability shoe might be useful for them to mitigate an injury. So yeah, that the population level data just tells us we're just guessing. Just pick a shoe off the shelf at random, and you'll be as okay as any of the evidence tells us you will. Whereas actually in our settings, when we've got people sitting in front, I mean, if they're sitting in front of us in clinic, they've probably got a complaint, a pathology. I don't know what it's like in Oz, but certainly in the UK, not many people come to us who are pain-free, which is good, by the way, because treating pain-free people is a nightmare, because what are you actually treating? So we're saying, right, okay, you've got a space-occupying lesion in the forefoot. Maybe you should get something with a wider toe box, maybe get into a New Balance 4E or an Ultra with an anatomical toe box, or you've got, I don't know, a posterior ankle impingement, let's get you into a zero drop shoe, or an Achilles tendinopathy, let's get you into a high drop shoe. We refer to it here as pathology-specific prescribing. And at that moment in time, that might be a shoe that's useful for you. I feel so sorry when we talk about shoe logic, we're normally talking about like when a new runner says, what shoe shall I wear? Or someone goes to the running store. I think the running stores get a hard time because, someone comes in, they're new to running, they don't know any of the shoes, and they're like, oh, what shoe do I need? And like they're uninjured. I mean, I don't even know what I'd do for an uninjured runner. I was really fortunate to be part of a group of people that would set up a running shop, the first running shop actually in Kenya, in Nairobi. And we had a real opportunity, I thought, to do something different, to break the mold. So, when people come into a running store in the UK, at least, typically they'll ask them to, take their shoes and socks off. They'll look at their foot posture. They'll decide whether they are pronated, in air quotes, put them in a stability shoe, or they'll look at them and say, you're neutral, in air quotes, here's a cushion shoe. This was before we had carbon plates and, it's just gone bananas now, hasn't it? We thought in Kenya, we had the opportunity to say, right, like we could train up these staff and say, right, when someone comes in, say to them, okay, like, do you have any previous history of injury? And we gave them a little crib sheet that said, if these structures have previously been injured, maybe these shoes are to be lent towards. Do you have any current injury? We gave them a second crib sheet. Again, we got that comfort filter that Ben O'Neill colleagues always talk about, although largely theoretical. I think the shoe being well-fitting is probably important. I don't think any of us disagree. So we kind of got to the point where we're like, the patient can kind of pick what they want as long as it's well-fitting and comfortable. And, if they're, we even taught the staff to do a lunge test, tibial angle, and said, look, if they're a little bit limited sagittally, lean towards a higher drop, or, talk to them about how important it is to do strength training, or, wrapped around their running. So we really wanted this running shop experience to be a bit more like a clinical encounter. The reality is, after a while, the staff you've trained move on, other staff come in. You just get to a point where staff are just selling shoes based on the way the foot looks again. And that's what runners come in sort of expecting, because that's what they read in the magazines and on the internet. And here we are back where we started. So, I always say to runners, I mean, most runners I know, and I'm the same, we don't have one pair of shoes. We don't have three pairs of shoes. We have double digits at least pairs of shoes. We use them in rotation. We use different shoes for different sessions. I'll use one shoe. There's one of my shoes I'd never wear in the rain. And, so we make decisions that are well beyond the scope of what our feet look like. And I think that's probably okay.
I think you make some really interesting points there about how a lot of it is around belief systems, both from the runner themselves and the person they're seeing, whether it's the shop staff or the practitioner. I think we kind of oversell the fact that we think we can give them all the answers, but actually a lot of our decision making is based upon the shoes we've got on with personally, or feedback we've got from other people that we've seen.
I think oversell is the perfect word there, John. Yeah, we probably give shoes too much credit for stuff. We give them too much credit for being able to prevent injury. Too much. Some runners come into clinic, they give the shoe too much credit for being the thing that injured them. I think they just probably get too much credit, and they're oversold generally. And I think the problem is that none of us have got all really, really strong answers. That's the problem, isn't it? When you don't really have a united, agreed approach or answer, that leaves the door open for other things to creep in. And that's where we are. Things that, that people post on social media, things that are in magazines, things that someone at the running club tells you, when you're on the track, all of those things that might be nonsense, might not be, but the door's open so they can creep in. If the door wasn't open in the first place, they wouldn't creep in the first place. But I think it's open because we don't fully understand the topic.
Yeah. I guess that takes us down to our tech and tools segment now, which is gateways to innovation. And do you use much objective testing technologies such as the Zebras or the Volt or in-shoe pressure systems, or even specialist gate cameras in your practice?
So in our clinic, we have valve, forced X. We have handheld dynamometers. Honestly, physios use them a lot more than I do, if I'm honest. But in the clinical setting, probably not as much tech as people would expect. I'm an old man. I'm a bit old school. In university, we've got Valve, we've got Run 3D, so 3D gait analysis. We've got PDAR, in-shoe pressure. Like we teach and we expose our students to all of these bits of kit, so they can identify and appreciate their potential value, or perhaps their limitations, which all bits of kit have, don't they? Potential, those two things. But I myself don't use loads of kit in a clinical encounter, I must confess.
And do you find that it's important when you're teaching, I guess, the younger podiatrists and students to be a podiatrist first and then kit second?
Ideally, yes. I know people want the kit. I know people like the kit. I know people think that the athletes and the patients like the kit, and some of them probably do. But I think people do jump there a bit quick sometimes at the cost of building up other skills that would be really, really useful. Yeah.
Any future tech that you're involved with research on the horizon coming up that you're willing to share?
No, I don't. I mean, other than the 3D printing stuff, and we're doing a bit of stuff with that, like a lot of people are. I think that's in the sphere of kind of podiatry where I work, that's probably the way that our practices are going to change the most in the next 10 to 15 years. I think is with regards to the design of provision of orthoses, and we got a few people in the UK already that have got 3D printers in their clinic, and so they're not even having to send out to the labs. They're just kind of seeing the patients, designing the devices in the clinic, printing them in clinic. I'll be honest, I don't know how much 3D printing you guys are doing in Oz. I know that art at footwork is all across it in Melbourne, but a lot of the 3D printed devices I've seen, they're nowhere near where I want them to be aesthetically if I'm going to give them to a Premier League footballer. I know it's ridiculous, but these things have to look a certain way. It's all part of the psychology of this medical device. It has to look the business, particularly in elite sport. But I think in all settings, there would be a potential benefit of it looking nice. And we'll get there for sure. We'll absolutely get there. But I haven't seen loads of 3D devices yet that are where I'd want them to be. But yeah, that's probably the thing that I think changes our practice the most in the next 10 years.
Yeah, definitely. Well, time for a new segment. Ian, you're the first person to ever participate in this segment. Overrated versus underrated. So we're going to have a mix of clinical opinions and a few laughs. So the first one, I'm just going to ask Ian first, and then we'll go around the table to Harriet, then John. Topic number 1, overpronation is a diagnosis. Overrated or underrated?
Do you need reasoning or just an answer at this stage? I mean, listen, overpronation is a diagnosis. Overrated. This is a hill I'll die on for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I'll never be convinced otherwise.
John? Harriet? Yeah.
I do think that patients understand it. So when you talk to them, that's like they've obviously done some sort of Googling or looking into it. And so that's a word that they understand, and that's a hard one to get around.
See, I think it's totally overrated because it's more about the timing than I think that's the thing that the overpronation doesn't actually kind of clarifies when the pronation happens. And that's what I'm constantly talking to clients about is when, because you need to pronate. I think as Ian was saying in there, you've said many a time, Ian, that everyone's foot pronates at some point in the gait cycle.
Yeah. I guess if we do say it to patients, we probably shouldn't get lost in our own thoughts that are sent out to patients, yeah? Topic two, medial posting in orthotic design, overrated or underrated? Ian.
Listen, I fully acknowledge I've got bias. I've got skin in this game, but underrated. I hope because otherwise, what am I doing with my research?
Harriet?
I like a medial post. I think it's underrated.
Totally, I agree, and I think as well that the rear foot, the value of the rear foot posting has a huge impact. I think in terms of giving us some alternatives to just filling up the arch.
Yeah, I agree with all the above. Number three, plantar pressure mapping, overrated or underrated? Ian.
This might upset people. I think it's a little bit overrated. Listen, outside of the world of diabetes, we're talking within sports podiatry here, I assume. So clearly in the insensate foot, the at-risk foot, massively, not overrated whatsoever. But in sports and exercise podiatry, I will lean towards being slightly overrated.
Harriet?
I'm going to be a fence sitter. I'm going to be a rated, either over or under. I use it in my clinic. I like about a picture. I mean, it tells you what I already knew, but it really helps with education and a visual component to the treatment.
John, I know you use this stuff.
Oh, it's totally overrated from a clinical point of view, but it's a great sales tool. So
Yeah.
Agree with you.
And I guess as well, when it comes back to some of your work about the kind of psychosocial side of podiatry, I think it does have a role in that place because it can help to people to understand or to try to understand what's happening. And often with some of the kind of, particularly the kinetics, it's very hard to see it. So I think from that point of view, it does have a place. But as a diagnostic tool, it's totally overrated.
All right, topic four, foot intrinsic strengthening, overrated or underrated? Ian.
Listen, if that last one upset people, I'm definitely going to upset people here. This is overrated, and let me explain why. I don't know if this is the best analogy, but I view intrinsic foot muscle weakness a bit like leg length discrepancy, in that it's incredibly common. I think if you look for it, you'll find it. And I think it has dubious links to the development of pathology. And I'm dubious about, or suspicious about, kind of when you give people these things to do, are you just giving them something to do while nature does its thing and they regress to the mean? I'm happy to be proven wrong in time when data supports it, but present day, I think it's the modern day orthotic device that people are throwing at everything. I think it's overrated.
Harriet?
I'm relieved that you said that, Ian, because I also think it's overrated.
I'm relieved you're agreeing.
And Osborne also would agree.
Listen, I love John, super nice, but he's also an incredible scientist, and I think with his scientist hat on, he'd acknowledge he knows more about the evidence behind resistance training and strength work than most of us, right? And I think he'd probably, I hope he would probably agree with us. I'm sure if he listens to this and he doesn't agree, I'll soon get a text from him though, so that's fine.
John?
Oh, I'm on your side, Ian. I think it's overrated.
Yeah. I think it's nuanced and patient dependent, but on a population global based scale, evidence is not there. Number five, stack height debates in running shoes. Do we really need 50 mil of foam? Ian, overrated or underrated?
Are you asking if stack height is overrated or whether debating it is overrated? Let me just clarify.
Let's go both.
Because I think debating something is always to be encouraged. So debating it is appropriately rated. Stack height itself, I don't think anyone really needs 50 mil of foam. I speak as someone that loves cushioning though, and I'm loving this. I don't like the term maximalist, but you know what I mean. I'm loving this kind of high stack height trend that we're currently in, or that like the Nike Vomero. Just I'm suddenly 6'3" in these shoes. It's amazing, and they feel super plush on my feet. But I'm also not totally convinced that they do much in, when we look at, well, I know when we've looked at the data for like injury risk mitigation, I don't know that don't they do what we used to think they did? So overrated, underrated. I think debating is always to be encouraged. I think stack height itself, I'm going to go appropriately rated. I'm being biased. I'm looking through the lens of someone that is loving shoes with a high stack height at the moment. I'm a master's runner. I'm 47 soon. My bones need cushioning.
I love a good max cushion shoe, but I think I agree with Ian. I think the shoes themselves are probably overrated, but the debate is underrated.
Love it.
I haven't actually worn a 50 mil shoe before, but I have worn a 45 and I love it.
Yeah.
Do I think it's overrated or underrated? I don't know. No, I like it. I'm pro. Don't tell Andy Bryant.
I think they're underrated. They just look cool. I think they're underrated.
Andy doesn't listen to this podcast, does he? He will hunt me down when he's heard my intrinsic, our take on foot strength.
He was actually the previous guest to you.
He was.
Okay. Different vibes. Listen, I love Andy. I think I love what he's doing. And I think it's like, you can really like someone and disagree with their message and vice versa. So that's part of being a clinician and a scientist, isn't it?
Well, it goes to show that it all works, doesn't it? Max shoes, people get better.
Number 6, arch support sandals. Overrated or underrated, Ian?
So listen, you guys, I'm sure you've been to the UK, right? We don't get a lot of time of the year to even wear sandals. So the reality is for the 3 weeks of the year that we get, the sun comes out, if someone wants to wear a completely flat kind of flip-flop Havaiana, they'll probably get away with it. We do have Archies here now, which I know are an Aussie brand. There's a UK website for Archies now. So clearly it's slowly kind of dripping this way. I don't have loads of experience with them, but I do certainly have patients that I point towards them because they wear Orthoses all year round, and suddenly they say, my feet ache or feel tired when I'm in flip-flops. So I would say they are appropriately rated.
Harriet?
I agree. That's why they feel, often hate the way they look.
John?
I think they are underrated, actually, because when you compare it to what people typically wear, they're a bit of a game changer. I think often as podiatrists, we kind of don't consider what the clients are wearing indoors.
Yeah. All right, we've got 2 more. Sports podiatrists in football clubs, overrated or underrated? And football in this context is what we will probably call soccer.
Not AFL.
Premier League.
Yeah, I was going to say, because the podiatry set up within AFL is elite, and is a model that I wish all other sports would follow. But in soccer, certainly over here, Premier League, I would say, and I say this to someone that obviously works in it, we are possibly a little bit underrated. We are being utilised well and more than we ever have, but I still think there are scenarios where we could, again, acknowledging my bias, I feel there are scenarios where we could probably be used a bit more than we are. So I'd say they are currently underrating us as a profession.
I also agree, underrated. Podiatry has got such wide scope. We do musculoskeletal, but we also do sort of skin and the sort of situations, and I think that all counts in a sports setting. So underrated.
John?
Same. But I think there's some really good people that are doing a lot of work with the physio teams in the football clubs to actually increase our scope and I guess just standing within the club.
Yeah. Underrated, I think. Athol Thompson is a prime example.
Yeah. He's crushing it over here at the moment. Crushing it. Yeah.
Last one. The coffee served at conferences, overrated or underrated, Ian?
Well, listen, I've been fortunate enough to speak at 2 conferences in Australia, one in Brisbane, one in Perth. I know you guys take your coffee very seriously. The coffee at Australian conferences is phenomenal. At UK conferences, it's massively overrated. I barely touch the coffee at a UK conference. Have you come over to the UK and had coffee? Our conferences?
No.
No, don't do it.
Harriet?
Well, I think that Australian coffee at conferences is overrated, but after hearing that, maybe they're okay.
Depends where your baseline is, doesn't it? Yeah.
It's way better in Australia than the UK.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe we're just a little bit snobby over here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess this takes us to our future footprint. Ian, where's your career heading next, and what excites you the most?
So we got a few more. We got a few research projects on the go, as we always have. You know, I, I think what excites me the most is I really feel, with every year that passes and we get more students coming through, I really do think the future of the profession's in a pretty solid place when I see the sort of enthusiasm that the next generation has, that youthful enthusiasm that possibly I once had. So I'm excited to kind of play a very small part in sort of paying it forward with regards to kind of helping bring on, mentor, educate, whatever they need from us, the future or the future generations, the future of the profession, and then along the way, just hopefully keep churning out some papers, churning out some research projects. That I'm a pretty simple guy. I'll be honest. That buzz you get when you publish a paper, it just never goes away. It's what makes you want to kind of do it again. You kind of, like when you were at university, you did an assignment and you finished it and you handed it in and it was done. That feeling of kind of, that adrenaline dump when it came out of you, you were like, thank God that's done. I never want to do that again. You get that. But then when you see it in, black and white published, you're like, oh, okay, just one more time. So for me, yeah, I'm a pretty simple guy. Just keep publishing work, keep trying to contribute to the understanding and keep trying to kind of help the next generation in the best way I can, if I can.
I guess our final strides. Where can our listeners connect with you or learn more about your work moving forward?
So I've taken a bit of a step back from social media. That's not to say I'm not on social media, but like the other day I posted something on Twitter, or X, sorry, as it's now called, for the first time it was only because we published a paper that was getting a bit of media attention. For a group of, Kylie Williams from Monash was the lead author, and it was getting quite a bit of media attention. So I thought I better put something on Twitter about it. I went on, I realized I hadn't posted on there for 18 months. Same with Instagram. Like my last Instagram post on my grid was I think 18 months ago. I just took a real step back from it. I'd rather spend my time, marking students' essays or writing up a publication than on social media. But that said, I am on there. I'm Sports Podiatry Info on Instagram. I think I'm Sports Pod on Twitter. But basically, don't go to Twitter. You won't get it. Yeah, if you want to get hold of me, you want to message me, direct message on Instagram, Sports Podiatry Info, or my email is ian@sportspodiatryinfo.co.uk. That's probably where I am. But I'm not. I leave social media to the youngsters now.
Awesome. So Ian,
before you go, or the last thing, I thought I'd quickly mention that your podcast is still going pretty strong.
Yes.
Oh yes, yeah. Thanks for that. Appreciate the mention. Yeah, are we allowed to
Podchat Live got me through COVID.
Did it? Oh, amazing! Oh, that's so nice to hear. Are we allowed to mention it on here? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
So Craig Payne and I still do weekly episodes, Podchat Live. We're up to, I think we're just about to record episode 180. So yeah, we still churn. Again, it's funny actually, you think about that and all we're doing is it's me getting together with a mate on a weekly basis talking about research. It's pretty much what I've done from week one of my career. Since 2003 I've done it, but obviously fast forward and it's such as the narcissism nowadays. You don't just do it; you have to record it and assume that other people will care and want to listen to it. But yeah, we still churn that out on a weekly basis. That's Podchat Live on Spotify, on Apple, wherever you get your podcast, kind of thing. Yeah, appreciate that, John. Thank you.
That's Fantastic. All right. I'm sure you've talked about his great marathon achievement as well.
Yeah, it was really cool because I'd had a message from the person who sort of runs the medical team at London saying, do you want to work this year? And most years I say no because I'd rather, it's on a Sunday and I'll be honest, I'd rather spend it with my family, to be honest. But when Craig was coming over and he was running and I was like, you know what? Yeah, it would be kind of cool to be at the finish line. So obviously it was an awesome achievement from him. He had a bit of a tough time in the run up, as I'm sure you probably know, with various injuries and things. But I thought, I'll wait at the finish line for him. So I met him at the finish line. So yeah, it was really cool.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Well, Ian, thank you for coming on to Soul Science. If anyone has not gotten enough of you, Podchat Live is the next place to go.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. Really, really appreciate it.